Hi, Tennille. Can you hear me? I set this up a little early to send it. Oh, wait a second. Okay. Hey, Tennille, can you hear me? I set this up early so that I could send out the links in advance. And then I saw you came in, so I thought, okay, let me come on here and say hi. I'm just going to straighten out the chair here. Ow! All right, just to get the non-professional stuff out of the way. All right, let me see how this works. Okay, what I've done so far, Tennille, you'll tell me what you think. I didn't have a chance to type the questions yet for 1920. Where are my bandages? So here, for instance, Tennille, if you can see this, I can't read the comments at the same time as I'm putting up these banners. But what I did, at least for part 1 and for part 2, I typed up the questions that you had asked in the videos so that I could put them up on the screen, maybe one after the other slowly, so people can have like talking points. So please tell me what you think of that. I'm going to just pull this off for the moment and put this back instead. Oh, hello, Kate. Hello, Deb. You know what? I'll take that thing off. Guys, I'm a total noob, okay? We're going to get there. Hang on. Let me remove that. Okay. So we're scheduled to go live at 10 p.m. It's great that some of you are here. I'm glad you found it. Can you tell me, please, if you found it either through the email link that I just sent out or if you were subscribed to the channel and you got a notification? That'll help me keep track in the future for how to best communicate with everybody. Okay. All right, so Cousin Kate says we can hear you. Guys, if I get too loud, which I have a tendency to do when I'm excited, just let me know so I'll tone it down. Deb, it's so nice to have you here. I don't know how hot it is in Florida or the UK right now. Tennille, I think you said it was pretty warm near you in the 90s, if I'm not mistaken. Here in Montreal this evening, with our humidity, it's feeling like 104, and I actually happen to be in the hottest room in the house, so you're going to see me refilling my little ice cup here pretty often because it's really hot. Okay, yeah, Kate is in London, and you got the email, Deb. Perfect. You got the email link, Kate. Okay. YouTube sent notifications 2 seconds before you got the link. Great. Okay. Yeah, that's when I think I put it live here just to get it started. I don't know yet how to put a background image that says like we're going to go live shortly. So it's just the black screen with the little message, but I'll start learning and figuring that all out. Oh, Tennille, I didn't fix yet. I'm sorry. I totally forgot the moderation. But you can go ahead and type in questions if you want as you go, or you tell me when you want us to get started, Tennille, and then I'm going to start scrolling through those questions that you mentioned in the 3 videos that you prepared for us discussing the different topics, part 1 in 1919 and 1920. Like I said, I've got banner questions typed up for the first 2. I didn't get around to the 3rd one. I'm sorry, but we can discuss those as we go. You have the heat on, Kate? It's cold? Can we move there? Hi, Voon. Nice to see you joining us. Welcome. I hope your headache is feeling better, Voon, and that you've recovered a little bit. Tennille and I went live a little bit earlier, a few hours ago, to just try out how going live with StreamYard would work, and Voon just happened to catch the notification and she joined us to help us try it out, so that was really great. So I just want to say, if you can see, please tell me if you can see in YouTube in the chat box near the top, I've pinned a comment, and that should have the link to invite you to join if you want to come on screen. Okay, that'll then give us a split screen with either just you and I up here, or if more people join, it'll give us multiple people's faces on the screen if you think that would be fun. If you click that link, I believe StreamYard will ask you to allow permissions to use your phone or your desktop, whatever device you're on right now. Give it permission to use your camera and or your audio. If you want to come on just with like a little avatar and your voice and not a screenshot of where you are right now or what you look like, that's okay too as an option, okay? So just let us know. Tennille, you're so sweet. Thank you. Thank you very much for all the work you've put into creating this club. I really think it's fantastic, and you do such an amazing job, really, in the discussion videos, really giving an oversight of what you think about it, the book and the style of the writing with a lot of insights in. I really appreciate that, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Okay, so Tennille, what do you think? It is 10 p.m. Do you want us to start, want me to start putting up like the first question that you came up with from your video? I really want to be doing this in a format that everybody thinks is going to accommodate the best discussion. And if I do switch over to putting up those banner questions, I'm not going to be able to so easily see your comments. I'm going to set that up differently in the future, I think, that I'll be able to do the comments and the banners at the same time. But for now, I'm just going to toggle back and forth. So if I'm a little slow on catching somebody, please let me know. Okay. So Tennille might be, I think sometimes she's a little delayed in being able to respond to us depending on how her internet connection's working at the moment. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put up the first question that Tennille had asked in her video on part 1. And she had said, what struck us most about Toni Morrison's introduction to the book Sula? So Kate says, I'm clapping, lost my specs, so can't find emoji, LOL. You're so great. You're so sweet. Thank you. Okay, so that was the first question Tennille raised. I don't know, Tennille, if you want to share in the comments a little bit what your thoughts were, if anybody else to jump in. What I did do also, getting organized as we go through here, the little questions I typed up. I need a bigger font too, Kate. I need glasses. And then I typed up the comments that I saw under Tennille's videos. Hey, Chris. Nice to see you. I hope your preparations are going well for your big move up ahead and that you're cooling down a little bit now. Chris, I am sitting in the hottest room of the house, and I do not have a bucket of cold water for my feet. I should have done that too. But I do have some ice and some water, so I guess I'll survive. I'm so glad to see you here. Okay, so I don't know. Neil, sweetie, I need some of your guidance here. Do you want me to read a little bit of some of the comments that people left in the videos? Do people just want to start chatting in the chat about the question that's up on the screen? You guys have to tell me what it is that you most would like to see over here, okay? Once I get a sense of how we want this to work, I'll be able to just go ahead without asking you so many questions and driving you cuckoo. Tennille, you're a bit behind, so please go ahead. Okay, so I'm going to share some of the comments that were shared under the video. And Voon is saying, she says, the idea that they called it the bottom struck me the most. It kind of bothered me. And yes, because, and Deb is saying here, I'd have to say that it was how the landowner thought he had pulled a fast one on his freed slave and actually gave the slave some good land. Yes, and that's very interesting, right? Somebody had pointed out, and I think it may be you, Deb, actually. That's right, that Toni Morrison hints, right, at the start of the book, the way she introduces the whole feel of the bottom, that eventually the white man is going to reclaim that land once again, right? And then it's eventually going to be reclaimed, and they're going to, where am I getting the idea of a golf course? Did we actually read that? I spent so much time typing the questions, guys. I'm sorry. I should have just reviewed my own notes on the book. But yes, that was very, very interesting. That they gave it away, pretending they were doing a very generous and kind thing while actually keeping the more fertile land down in the valley to themselves. But eventually, I think it's interesting because it's almost like the white man came to resent the fact that the black families were flourishing in their own way with their own difficulties and their own troubles up in the bottom, And so eventually the white men had to take that away too. It's like, we don't want you having any kind of enjoyment. We're going to reclaim that for ourselves. Kate says, the black Mary and the nightshade struck me immediately. Yes, Kate, you had a very lovely insight into that. And let me find that. Yes, Kate, you wrote, snap. With the first line, I thought that she was maybe describing the difference between the two main characters. One who was sweet and tasty like blackberries, and one who could be poisonous and dangerous like a deadly nightshade. That was a really amazing insight that you had over there, Kate. I really think so. And it sort of, you're right, gives us a hint to what we can expect maybe to see in the deep down characters with Nell and Sula as we get to know them, as we see how they kind of negotiate life and the challenges that come to them. So if I go on to Tennille's next question. So she had mentioned, what passages clearly and vividly were portrayed in your mind's eye? And then after that, she had asked us, and perhaps it's related, can you imagine bottom? Can you see it and smell it? And are you there as you're reading Toni Morrison's words? Is she painting the picture for you? Are you immersing yourself in the experience? Are you getting a sense of what it is like to live and be there with all those families? Alrighty. So Tennille, I was struck by the phrase, in that place. It was as if some rare combination of elements combined to create a place that could harbor such a unique neighborhood, people, place, and history. That's very beautiful. Sounds like prose. Very, very nice, Tennille. Yeah, I was struck by the fact that the place that was highest above the valley was still named the bottom, because as much as the white man was giving these black families and the freed slaves some land, right, albeit under the guise of saying that it was good and fertile land for them, when actually it wasn't the best land right along the edge of the valley. But even then, it had to be named the bottom. It couldn't be most of the places, right? Top of the hill, top of the mountain, something like that. It'll give you the impression that it is topmost. But here, just because of the class of individuals who are living there, and I'm just using that word to describe the separateness between the blacks and the whites, the area was still called the bottom, even though the whites were technically living at the bottom of the land and the blacks were on top. No, the whites had to still use the terminology and reverse it to keep themselves feeling superior. Okay, it says the picture was very vivid indeed. And Tennille says, I love your view on that, Kate, that there was a sweet berry and a poison one there. Again, a special combination of elements for those to thrive in that place, literally as well as symbolically. Deb says, I think the author did a good job at describing Shadrach's PTSD. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that was excellent. And it was the imagery that was used and the feelings that were conveyed, I think they were very, very evocative. And they really gave us a sense of how much he was in distress, the confusion, the fear, and the lack of order and predictability in his world when he came back from the war. Boone says, I thought they thought too little of the people. That is why the bottom bothered me. Absolutely. And Tennille says, yes, Deb, I agree. I was suffering along with Shadrach. Okay, so if I go back now. Okay, one of the next questions, and if you want to stay on the last one, please, I'm just putting this up here. Tennille was asking us, how do you feel about modernization and progress in general? Let me come back. Boone says, I wanted to cry for him, Deb's way. And Kate said it was upside down almost. What is up is down, and what is down is up. It's very, very true. A very, very demoralizing experience, no? It's very sad to think of how we as people have treated one another along the way. And somebody had commented also, and I don't know if it was in this section or the next section. It's going to be coming up here. I'm going to have to highlight the notes a bit better next time. But somebody had mentioned how, now I've lost my train of thought. Oh, goodness gracious. Yep, I've lost it. Maybe I'll find it in all of these notes. Kate, you hate golf courses. Deb's Way says, how can you stop modernization? I don't think we can. No. Oh, yes, somebody had pointed out, and again, it may have been Deb, if I'm mistaken, somebody please correct me, how the white men felt that they were giving away, right? You wrote in one of the comments, when the work was completed, the white man tricked his former slave into believing that he was being gifted a valuable piece of land. But ultimately, the white man regretted doing so because the land was enjoyed and loved and grew to be plush and rich. And what was interesting, right, and I think you pointed this out as well, was that here are these slave owners, right, who came, they emigrated from different countries and came to what was then the United States a few hundred years ago, and they, in effect, stole the land from the native people and they called it their own. And then after generations of making use of the land, they then became the land owners. And then when the slaves that were once again indentured individuals who suffered so much under the hands of these new country folk who had come and taken the land, now these white individuals are then giving the land as though it is some gracious gift when it never belonged to them initially in the first place. That also struck me. All right, let me see what we've got here. Okay. Now, another question. How do you feel about the way that Toni Morrison has described these things in the opening section of the book? Okay, Tennille, you're in the chat if you want to elaborate exactly on what you mean by that, describing these things in the opening section. If you mean, let's say, the dichotomy between the white people and the black people living in the area, the juxtaposition of the land to illustrate the roles and the relationships, the high and the low. I'm going to take a little sip. Okay, that was ironic when it wasn't there to give away and using religion as a cover. Indeed, yes. I am going to drop once again in the comments the link if anybody wants to come up on screen and chat along with us. And let me then move on over here. Yes, this was very interesting. What did you think National Suicide Day meant before you read on and you found out how it was that it came to be created? What did you think? What were your first thoughts when you read those words, National Suicide Day? That was very, very interesting, I thought. Excuse me, I'm just going to have a bit of cool water. And anybody have any comments to share on that one? You didn't like the name? No. It's very sad, and it almost promotes the idea that there would be a simpler and easier way out. To say, okay, collectively on one day, let's all give this some thought, and if we are going to end ourselves, let's do it now and make it something that's predictable. Voon said, my first initial thought was that the people are not given enough help or know where to get the help they need. That's absolutely right. I mean, when we think about how fortunate we are today, I mean, we still have, for so many individuals, particularly the veterans, for the homeless, disadvantage those who are learning disabled or mentally challenged. There are still a number of resources that are lacking, but there's absolutely no comparison to the fact that there was likely nothing available in World War One. Kate said I was totally baffled about what it was. National Suicide Day. And, I was thinking when I was reading how the, let's say, whether it was the orderlies or the nurses or the doctors in care of Shadrach while he was still in the hospital, how they were talking to him. It's very easy, I think, sometimes for me, let's say, to jump to thinking, oh, they're not supportive enough of him, they're not kind, look how mean they're being to him, they're clearly not seeing his pain and addressing it. But I think I have to also flip it and say to myself, I can imagine that nurses and doctors who mostly, largely, genuinely are very empathetic and caring individuals, can't imagine what it would be like for them to be working under those circumstances where it was quickly treat people and get them out and get them out and get them out the door because there were so many more coming in, and how terribly frustrating and disheartening and demoralizing it must be for someone in care services like that, whether it's a doctor or a nurse, when your hands are tied and there's nothing more you can do. And I wonder then sometimes if individuals in those roles also put up some sort of a wall to protect themselves from all the pain they suffer every day with all the horrible suffering that they see. Tennille says, I find her descriptions very vivid. I can see the spoon carver's hands and smell the dust. I love the way, Tennille, that you really take the time when you're reading to focus on all these little details to really enhance your experience of the words that you're reading. I think that's amazing. I need to slow down and spend more time doing that as well, too. Tennille says, when I first heard National Suicide Day, I thought it was going to be a day for remembering people who had killed themselves. Ah, yes. Very good. Good. Yeah. Like a remembrance day for those who chose that way out because they were suffering so much. He says PTSD wasn't even acknowledged. It's still not really understood. I am a registered nurse and it's banned in ER now. Can't imagine what it was like then. Tennille says she's a little behind in the stream. We are bearing with you, Tennille. We are so glad you are here. We will wait, no problem. All right. Now, when I try to find these banner questions, it's not like once I've clicked on one, the color changes to show me which is the next in the loop. I've got to scroll through all of these questions to find which one is next. I'm going to have to think about something for the future, maybe number them. Have you ever been in a time of great stress and focused on something else, maybe something small, hyper-focusing on a mundane detail of life to kind of maybe ground yourself? Let me go to the comments, see who's saying what here. Suicide was illegal then, Kate? Yes, I think it's still, as well, it's certainly treated as being illegal in many places, right? Certainly assisted suicide is frowned upon in many, many countries of the world. Going back to that question, where was it? Yes. So has anybody ever been in a state where they were so stressed they focused on some very tiny, minute little detail of life? Or, as Tennille asked next, have you ever experienced a hallucination that you thought was real? What I noticed about Shadrach, and particularly in regards to the plate of food that he has, and that he was happy that the food was sectioned and that the food from one section was not mixing and blending with the other. They were all very separate and easily identifiable. That reminded me of a time, later childhood, very early adolescence, when I became almost obsessive in my neatness with certain things. I remember that the little items that I had on my desk and bureau in my room, they all had to be aligned and positioned in just the right way. And that gave me a little bit of a, yes, a sense of, not that I knew it at the time, but a sense of control over my environment. And I think that's highly likely what Shadrach was trying to do over here, trying in as many ways as he could to impose some sort of a predictable structure and control with very delineated boundaries so that he could learn to function again in this world because of all that he had suffered through. Kate says, yes, on my then wedding ring, when I ruptured my gallbladder, you focused on your wedding ring. Ooh, ruptured gallbladder, that sounds awful. Yes, and I think in your video, Tennille, you were sharing with us how you were focusing on the movement of the second hand on the clock when you were in childbirth with your son. And Moon says, if I am driving, it is so awful you shouldn't be on the road and you have no choice. I try to focus on God being with me and guiding me. That's very beautiful. And Tennille says, as our Kate pointed out, Miss Morrison chose every word deliberately. I think there are layers of meaning. It's a short book, but packed full of meaning. Yes, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. And that's likely the reason, right, that she's a Nobel Prize winner in literature, because she packs so much in so eloquently and so beautifully, and not in an obvious, in your face sort of way, but delicately there for you to uncover if you want to. All of these hidden insights into what's going on with the characters in their world. Kate says that was his sense of compartmentalization to gain control. Yes, absolutely, that's right. So, Tennille was asking us, what are your feelings about the comfort of a straitjacket? And this reminded me very much of when our first son was born and I was in the hospital, and a nurse came to show me how to swaddle a baby in a blanket, because the children really feel much more comforted when they are kind of like bundled up, because then it reminds them of being in the womb surrounded by the warmth and the protection of their mother, right? Kate says her books are like onions, in my opinion. That's right. You peel off layer by layer, right? Does anybody else have any thoughts on the imagery of the straitjacket? Foon says, I think it would make me happy being in the jacket. The idea of giant hands and being, I guess, on my own, is that what you mean? Would scare me. Yes, hopefully it was very comforting to him. Hello, little Elsie. Ah, lurking here. Glad to have you lurking. Hi, sweetheart. And Deb's going to say, I would feel too confined, imprisoned in a way. Yeah, I remember my parents telling me, I was born in 1965, in the days when they still would have the babies kept separately from the mothers in a nursery, and then every now and then, right, the baby would be rolled in their little cot or whatever to the mother's room and then be brought back to me in the nursery with all the other babies. And my mother said she remembered somebody came to visit while I was in the nursery, so they walked down there and they looked through the glass window into the nursery, and let's say there are a dozen babies there, and they're all swaddled up except for me, because the only time I wouldn't cry was when I was free to move around. They swaddled the other babies, they were quiet, they swaddled me, that was it. I was unhappy. It was totally the opposite. I wouldn't have liked the confinement either, honestly. And Kate says, that's sad to find comfort in the straitjacket, but I get the imagery. Yeah, I think because Shadrach, right, so much needed to feel that things weren't out of control, that he was safe, that he was protected somehow. Tennille says, yes, and I agree, the straitjacket would be a relief. And Kate is asking, little Elsie, how are you doing? Little Elsie who's joining us from Australia. Boone says, my thoughts of hurting someone with my giant hands. I wouldn't want to do that, or people to be afraid of me. I was thinking afterwards, there's a scene, right, where I think someone sees Shadrach standing inside a cabin. Have I got that wrong? But somewhere we get a description of Shadrach's hands, and they are not some monstrous, deformed version of what his hands used to be. And what I thought was that Shadrach must be imagining his hands to be these big, growing, monstrous things, because being out as a soldier on the battlefield, naturally he would have killed either directly to eliminate the enemy or in defense. And I think what he did in his mind was see that, okay, I'm now a changed person, and that mental change, that moral change that I've experienced now that I've taken human life is going to be reflected in the very hands that carried out the death of something that was alive. That's how I saw his troubles with his hands. Tennille says, I would prefer the jacket to uncontrollable hand hallucinations. Yes, absolutely. Excuse me. Deb says, yes, I believe it was in his imagination, right? And she says also that it was all a part of his PTSD. And Foon's in agreement with that. Little Elsie, you have such a sweet sense of humor. Hello, everyone. Sorry for being late. I have a note from my parent. We're glad you're here whenever you show up, sweetheart. Honestly. All right. So then Tennille asks us, how did the image of Shadrach's own face help his hands stay still? So you guys tell me what you think. You tell us all what you think. Let me go back to the comments, see what everyone is saying. Okay, Tennille, I remember seeing my feet freakishly swollen once and thought these could not be my feet. For several minutes, I was in disbelief that those were my feet. It was horrifying, and I felt so bad for Shadrach. That was another one of Tennille's questions that I ran out of time to be typing up. I should have started much, much sooner. And I think, yes, she had asked, have you ever experienced your own physical body in a way that it actually wasn't, either through body image or under stress or in a predicament where you saw something about your own body that seemed foreign and strange and not under your control? So there we go. I don't have that question typed up to put up here for you. So Deb is asking, you mean when you finally saw a reflection of his face, he realized that he wasn't really a monster? Yes, that's right. I wonder also if that helped him because he realized too, maybe, I think you're absolutely right. I think that's like the number one explanation. I wonder also if he saw that because perhaps behind the reflection of his face, other things were reflected that showed him he was no longer on the battlefield, that he was now in a different place, that while in his mind maybe it was very vivid and he was still there in the midst of battle, that reflection was not only showing him not being a monster, but also showing him as being removed from that very monstrous battlefield where all the horror took place. So Tennille asks us, what are your thoughts to Shadrach's solution to the unexpectedness of death and the fear that caused it? Right, he institutes, right, National Suicide Day. He wants to try to contain when death takes place as much as possible, so that it's predictable, you can expect it, you can prepare yourself for it. Okay. And Kate says, yes, after an epidural, my feet were swollen and looked monstrous. I remember coming home from the hospital after the birth of my first son, and my feet were ballooned up like crazy. That had not been the case during pregnancy. They were fine. I come home from the hospital and they were huge. I couldn't even get shoes or slippers on. I could just sort of like half slide into something to be able to walk from the car to get into the house. And we were home for a few days, and then miraculously for me, my son was going to have a breast circumcision the next morning. And over that night, I went to the bathroom so often and I was drinking water because I was constantly dehydrated and thirsty, that the swelling went down and I was actually able to wear a pair of shoes. But I remember looking at my feet and thinking, these are not my feet. And hopefully they're going to return to normal once again. Deb says it was his way to control the situation, creating National Suicide Day and trying to put things in place, right? Yeah, he's lost control of so much. Neil saying, yes, Kate. Mine was after childbirth. Childbirth changes so much in every way, kind of like its own battle. Yep, that is very true. And Kate, oops, sorry, I skipped ahead. Kate said he compartmentalized it and made death predictable and something that one could choose. Yeah, I think that was very important for him, that one has a choice in what happens. Little Elsie says, my knee and foot is so swollen today because I fell off a ladder yesterday. Oh, I wish you a speedy and full recovery, little Elsie. Make sure you rest it up a lot, eh? Keep some pressure off of it. So I guess this is your own little experience of what your body looks like differently than what you're used to, you know? Goodness. Excuse me. So the last question that I have here written down from Tennille for the chapter entitled 1919 was, what are your views on the way this man handled his mental torture and emotional torment? How do you think he did? And little Elsie, I think you can see everybody is wishing you well. That you should feel better soon. So again, let me put that question back up here for us to think about. What are your views on the way that Shadrach handled his mental torture and emotional torment? And certainly he was all alone in trying to manage it, right? There was nobody there by his side talking him through it, reassuring him, giving him love. And I imagine too that there were many people, right, welcoming these young boys in many instances home from war, acknowledging the sacrifice that they made, sharing with them how brave and heroic they were, and offering them support in every regard. Very, very difficult. Excuse me. Deb says, Shadrach did the best he could, considering he had to do it on his own. There was no therapist there to guide him through the process. That's right. Kate says, I don't think that you ever do handle it. He kept quiet, which many men did post-war. Yes, I know from my father's own experiences during World War II. He was a Polish Roman Catholic, and when the Nazis came into Poland in September of 1939, his family, because his father was involved sort of like in town government, his family was rounded up very quickly, and they were put into a labor camp during the duration of the war. Not a concentration camp, thankfully, but a labor camp which had its own horrors. And that was something my father never really discussed very much about. He may have initially told my mother a bit about that, and then it was through my mother that I heard some of my father's experiences. But he always kept it sort of like sealed up in his own little box, let's say, somewhere in his heart and or his mind. And it was to remain there because it was just too awful. Boone says, I think he did the best he could. with what mental state he had. I just had to imagine what it would be like coming back and starting life after the war and what he has been through. And Deb's saying this was during World War I time frame, which I think was more accepted by everyone. That's right. People certainly weren't encouraged to discuss their feelings. And life was so much tougher then for everybody, right? We certainly didn't have the medical advances. We didn't have the economic advantages that many of us enjoy now. And so there was always this constant pressure to get on every day, day by day, and fight to survive and to struggle, that people sometimes didn't even have the luxury, I guess, to entertain, trying to be more patient and understand with someone in their suffering. Boone says, I imagine before the war he had all kinds of different ideas, but once you endured war, whole different ballpark, all past ideas are gone. And Kate says it was supposed to be a land fit for heroes, and they were completely let down. Tennille shares that many turned to drugs or alcohol, and in those days, there was no help, only shame. Boone shares that it's heartbreaking to think that has to happen. Okay, Kate is saying the labor camps were equally horrific. I'm so sorry. You're very sweet. I'm glad my father made it out, thank God. And Deb says the anti-war feeling didn't really start until Vietnam. Yes. And it's a shame, too. I think it's awful the way veterans were treated. I mean, many didn't sign up voluntarily. They were conscripted to go, and they did their valiant best, and yet they came back and people took out the animosity they felt towards the government's position on participating in the Vietnam War and directed it towards the vets as though they were somehow of their own accord responsible. So instead of having compassion for them, many of them have been, I think, less so now, but many were, and some still are looked upon with disdain. Kate shares no one had been involved in the first war as civilians like in the second one, so they could not understand. Very true. Tennille says when survival is a daily struggle, mental and emotional health is pushed back. Yes, that's right. I think about what we learned in the psychology course in university. I'm coming up with the name Darwin, and it definitely wasn't Darwin, but there's that triangle, that hierarchy of needs. And at the very top is like the fulfillment of what your aspirations and your talents are. But at the very bottom, right at the very base of the triangle where we all start off with, that's where we have survival, right? That's making sure we have air, water, shelter, clothing, and food, right? And as you're pointing out over here, mental and emotional health and support is somewhere higher up on that hierarchy. It's not at the very bottom of day-to-day life. It's just hand-to-mouth survival. Maslow, yes. Thank you very much, Kate. I appreciate that. Yes, that was Maslow. Okay, so I went through all of the questions that I had typed up from Tennille, but although I didn't type them up, I do have them printed off over here for the section 1920. And if anybody wants to go back, please just drop a comment and stop me, or if you want to mention another point, please just let me know. Okay, I'm here to just sort of like be the in-between between the comments and get this live stream up, but really this is for everybody, so please just jump in and share what you would like. So for 1920, one of the first questions that Tennille asks, she says, either the mother or the child, and I'm going to pronounce it the way I know here in Quebec, the French way. I think Tennille said Helene. I'm going to say Hélène or Nell. How would you feel going on that train trip and using the restroom in front of those muddy eyes of those men? Oh, Kate, thank you. Kate says, I'm doing a great job. You're very sweet. I appreciate that. Thank you, dear. I can't imagine that. I guess none of us can today. We haven't experienced that degree of segregation and persecution and hatred. And Can't imagine what it was like when you got onto a bus or a train and you were told, no, this car isn't for you. You can only go there, or you can't come in at all. There's no entry for you. There's no bathroom, no services here. You're unwanted. That must have been a horrible trip. Excuse me. And particularly for Helen, because here she is. She's quite prideful, not in a bad way, but she's proud of what she has made of herself. She feels very dignified. She does her best to have a beautiful dress and to look very, very presentable. And yet, no matter where she goes, she's going to be reminded, well, on the surface, you were trying to be this, but deep down inside, and this is something that Nil comes away with as an impression, right? You are actually not what you portray. And Nil comes up with this wonderful image, wonderful in the sense that it's so descriptive, not wonderful in the meaning of it, but that her mother is like custard, right? Kind of soft and malleable on the inside. Her mother, I think, is trying to present one image to the world that she really wants to believe is how she lives, and yet the world is still pushing back and saying, no, that's just superficial. Deep down inside, we know who you are, we're keeping you down, and it doesn't matter what you do to convince us that you're one of us, you're never going to fit in. So Kate says that was demeaning, and it's inhumane and unbelievable. She lost her veneer of respectability. Yeah, very nice way of phrasing it. Boone says, I couldn't possibly imagine. It makes me want to cry that people actually had to endure it. I feel like Helene rose above any negativity and kept that smile. She certainly tried to, right? And it's very interesting then. I don't have it here, but it's very interesting then too, right? That some of the, I think there were black men that were sitting in the train car and they were looking up at Helen, sort of like with disdain and disregard in their eyes. They were almost disgusted at how she was being polite and smiling to the white conductor. She was trying to rise above the negativity, but at the same time, it's almost like she's trying to straddle those two worlds, right? And in that trying to straddle, she's not going to fit in either one. The whites don't feel accepting of her because she just doesn't fit, no matter what her outward appearance is, because of the color of her skin and her heritage. And the blacks on the train, she's not necessarily going to fit in with them because they dislike how she is trying to be accommodating to a race that has been very suppressive. That's what I thought. Tennille says, Jim Crow laws were real down here in living memory. My mother remembers colored-only signs and when schools were integrated. This is only 100 years ago. Yes, it's very recent. Well, sure, even the fight for civil rights, that's not even 100 years ago, right? Kate says she was respectable in Ohio, but back in the South, she was projected right back to just being called gal. Once again, she was being reminded, okay, it doesn't matter, where you go, what you think you are, this is who you are to us, and this is what you will always be. So Tennille then asked, what do you think Helene means when she tells Nell that much-handled things are always soft, like Rochelle's skin? And when I heard that question, and I'm sorry I don't have it typed for you guys, it would be a lot easier probably for you to follow if it were here. So I'll repeat it again. What do you think Helene means when she tells Nell that much-handled things are always soft, like Rochelle's skin? Foon said, I didn't quite understand this part. Okay. I think Nell was very taken by the fact that her grandmother's skin felt soft to her. I mean, clearly for Nell, she's making this long trip under miserable circumstances of having to go to the bathroom in front of prying and watching eyes in the middle of nowhere. And she comes into this funerary place where it's dark and it's somber. And here's this grandmother she hasn't met yet in this bright yellow canary dress. I mean, totally not fitting in with the mood of the moment. And the grandmother at one point comes and sort of like scoops her, right, and hugs her. And Nell feels the softness of her. And so Helene, Rochelle's daughter, Nell's mom, comments on her own mother that many things that are often handled a lot will feel soft. Deb's Way says, I grew up in Kansas and it wasn't quite as racially divisive. I realized there were areas deep in the southern states that were very prejudiced. And Kate says something to do with her past prostitution. I think that's what Helen was hinting at, that her mother had been handled very often, and so she becomes soft. But at the same time, I'm wondering if the many handled things and that she is soft shows that she is soft in her own self-confidence and her own character and her own being, in that she will transform herself to suit whoever it is that she is with and whoever needs to be pleased. She can morph into this thing for one person. She can then change and mold herself into another for someone else. And so she remains soft. She's not really fixed in who she is and what her morals and values and standards are. She will change them to accommodate whatever the circumstances demand on her for her to survive as best as she thinks. Neil says, that smile was a compromise in my opinion. She was indicating that the conductor's behavior was expected and even acceptable. That's why the soldiers hated her for it, in my humble opinion. Voon said, I wasn't quite sure if that was what it was or not, so I was a little confused, Kate. So they were talking. So Voon is replying now to Kate when Kate had suggested that perhaps the reference to Rochelle's softness was a reference somehow to her past prostitution. Neil, do you want to share with us, if you're not on a delay, what you thought about that? And another one of Neil's questions is, what did Nell see? What appealed to her, and what was so very different? Okay, Deb says, I took it to be kind of a flirty smile to ease over the situation. Okay, we're talking about Helene's smile now to the white conductor on the train. I think you're right. She's trying to like soften the situation, diffuse it a little bit so it doesn't escalate into something that's going to be unpleasant. Very, very true. So Tennille had asked, right, what did Nell see and what appealed to her? What was so different? And she goes on to ask then, how did the trip and the funeral cause Nell to become self-aware? What did all of these things, the train ride, the funeral, the canary yellow dress, the soft skin, mean to Nell? What did she come away with thinking? So Tennille says, I think that the soldiers and Nell want to see defiance in Helene, and she was custard underneath. Ah, yes, you're right. They wanted to see that she was strong and solid in and out, and that she wouldn't waver, I guess, when in a situation where her behavior or her heritage was called into play or into question. So again, how do we think that this entire experience impacted on Nell as we go forward in the story? And how do we think this caused Nell to become more self-aware as she saw all of this? Deb's Way said they were all kind of disgusted by Helene's flirty attitude with the conductor, right? I think so. And Kate says, I think Nell saw a different way of life. We all have that friend whose life fascinates and repels us as it's different. Right? Okay. That's right. Some of the comments that were shared. Right, you had shared in a comment to the video, Kate, that you said, I agree that opposites attract and that we all had that friend at school whose life was so different to ours that we were intrigued and maybe repulsed at the same time. You see, it is often greener than our own, from our innocent childlike perspective, and we see what we want to, a trait often carried into adulthood. I should read that from the start. It's a case of the grass is greener on the other side, and I do believe myself that that is true. It is often greener than our own, from our own innocent childlike perspective, and we see what we want to, a trait often carried into our adulthood. And you also commented that during this trip, Nell sees the all-powerful, righteous mother begin to fall apart and concludes that she is weak and powerless and underneath. And Voon, you had shared that you feel like Helen is going to rise above any of the negative thoughts or looks, that she is a strong woman. I think she certainly does demonstrate a lot of strength in trying to, balance all of these different situations, right? She's trying to negotiate this trip with her young daughter under very, very difficult circumstances. You don't want to get on anyone's bad side, whether it is the conductor on the train or the passengers on the train. It's a very, very hard, right, tightrope that she's trying to walk. Hi, Eden. Eden is here with us. Hi, Eden. How are you? So glad to see you, dear. Thank you for coming. Okay, so Tennille says, I think Nell saw that her mother's way was not the only way, and that she was a separate person from her mother and had a different view, and she reacted differently to situations than Helen. True. So then Tennille asks, how did this awareness prepare Nell to make friends with Sula? Her new feelings of meanness, the thing that was only her. Let me read that again. I'm sorry, guys. How did this awareness prepare Nell to make friends with Sula? Her new feeling of meanness, the thing that was only her, only Nell. How did that prepare her? Kate says, if she sat in the wrong carriage, what would happen? I ask as a person from a country where there has never been segregation. Tennille, had you mentioned, I can't recall well enough from the book, had you mentioned in one of your videos that there was the threat that if Helen had gone into and stayed in the wrong carriage, the white passenger's carriage, that there was a potential for her being arrested or brought to jail? I hope I'm not mixing that up. Such awful consequences, no? A crazy thing. Tennille says, I also think that the trip showed Nell that her mother wasn't universally liked. In fact, it could be ignored by Rochelle or even hated by the soldiers. Kate says, I don't understand Jim Crow laws. To be honest with you, I'm not really familiar in entirety with what Jim Crow laws are. I had studied some American history in school, but not nearly enough that I'm familiar with what that is. And Deb shares that Kate, the conductor, could have literally thrown her off. Not awful, eh? In some cases, I have a feeling that she could have been arrested. Yeah, I think that Nell, seeing that her mother's behavior changed in different circumstances and in the presence of others, demonstrated to Nell that one is not necessarily fixed in one's being, that one has the ability to shift and become different people or present oneself differently. And I think that opened something up to her. And then that certainly was reinforced when she met her grandmother, Rochelle, who here there's a funeral and Rochelle is in this bright yellow, very flowery, very happy looking dress when it's a very, very somber occasion. And so Nell goes from seeing her mother as being very proper to then maybe losing a bit of her sure footing under the circumstances of the train ride, and now it advances even further. And Nell sees, wait a second, there's this huge disconnect from me to my mother to my grandmother. So wait a second, we're all sort of separate. We're not all the same. That means I'm separate too. Kate says that Helene had worked so hard on her persona, which wasn't as rigid. Very true. So then Tennille asks also, how did Nell and Sula's lifestyles differ? And how would each different home life appeal to the other? Right, we get a sense that Nell, of course, is coming from a very structured home where everything, I think Deb mentioned, everything has its place. Everything is very, very proper. And now she's introduced to Sula, where there's a extremely relaxed attitude in the home. There are people coming and going all of the time, whereas we can imagine that in Nell's very proper home, some would only be coming if they were invited in. So how did Nell and Sula's lifestyles, the differences in them, appeal to one another? So Tennille says, yes, she could have been, we're going back to talking about, yes, Helene could have been put off the train, arrested, or worse, depending on where she was and who she was dealing with. It was a shameful time in our history. So going to the question of Nell and Sula, Kate says, again, opposites attract, in my opinion. We all want what we don't have. And Deb is saying, it really was that bad, Tennille. Shameful. I can't even imagine that. I mean, this is not at all, not comparable at all. But here in Quebec, Canada has a Canadian Charter of Human Rights and has made it a requirement that one has the right to bilingual communications in any province across the country. Now, predominantly French Canadians live pretty much just in Quebec. There are some that are a little bit over the border of Quebec into Ontario, particularly in Ottawa, which is the capital of our country. But in many provinces, the percentage of French-speaking population is minute at best, maybe a little bit more so in some of the eastern provinces like New Brunswick, but even again, it's predominantly English. And yet here in Quebec, we have what are known as the language police. There is an official Office de la Langue Française. It's an official office where they go around and they monitor the signage on the businesses. You're not allowed to have an English-only sign or even name your business with something that sounds English. And signs are to be, if you're going to have any English on your sign, and that needs to be approved. The font size of the French language has to be twice as large as the font size of the English language. Now all documentation automatically comes to you in French in Quebec, and if you want it to come in English, it's supposed to be an easy process. It's a little bit harder to come by than it's supposed to be. This is, of course, not at all on the same level as the treatment of individuals with segregation. But even so, sometimes we do have a little feeling of what it is like when a people who share a land together are being divisive over something, whether it's race or their religion or it's their language. It's almost as though people almost have to find something to disagree with others with. Not always, but often I feel. Excuse me. Moon says, I think that it was just natural for two young friends to wonder what it would be like to see how the other lives. That's right. Okay. Kate says, I can't comprehend it or how it was allowed to happen, but hindsight is 2020. Tennille says, I agree, Voon. Most kids are interested by their friends' lifestyles. I think the trip particularly prepared Nell to meet Sula and explore that other life because she had seen fault in her mother. And Kate is sharing with us, that's the same in Wales, Ireland, and Scotland, Leah, with language. Yeah. I think it's just terrible. I mean, we all are people. We're all the same creations at heart, regardless of what we look like or what we sound like or what we believe in. And it seems so much easier sometimes for people to look for what is divisive and what can be hated, as opposed to try to put a little bit more effort into finding common grounds and working to be more understanding of one another to really achieve a beautiful world. We clearly have the ability here. We're blessed with so many resources that if we just join together instead, we could accomplish so much more. But I don't know that that's necessarily the default feeling for much of humanity. Kate says it's a tribal, horrible thing to make one group of people feel superior. Very true. And Boone says, I absolutely agree with you 100%, Kate. So that is the end of the questions that I have for this section. So anybody want to share any of their own thoughts about anything about the book, anywhere in the book at all? No order whatsoever. We can just have a free as we go kind of a chat. What does everyone think? Does anybody want to come up here on the screen and talk with everybody and share what you're thinking? I can put multiple people up here at a time if you want. You can come up just with a little avatar. You don't have to show your face if you're in your pajamas with your night cream on or your little curlers in your hair. Does anybody wear curlers in their hair anymore? No. I'm dating myself here. Deb's way. But Kate, you have that sort of thing in Great Britain with the royals and the non-royals. So I think Deb is addressing Kate's remark earlier, where Kate said it's a tribal, horrible thing to make one group of people feel superior. Moon says true, totally disagree with it. And Kate says, I don't even acknowledge the royals. I'm stuck with them. Tennille says, yes, and in that case, sometimes all one has is their pride. That's why the smile was so bad. It was a sacrifice of pride and acceptance of the way things were. Very true. Kate responds, plus, that is one family. That's the royals, yes. Tennille, do you want to? You seem to be pretty timely with the chat. Do you want to give us some more thoughts, or do you want to suggest something? Do you have any comments to make, other questions to add? Does anybody want to share what their thoughts are in general, or what they think is coming up next? I'm really intrigued by what Kate pointed out, how the right, there was that juicy, sweet, right, ripe and beautiful looking blackberry, and then we had the poisonous and dangerous, deadly nightshade, right? I guess that is perhaps hinting to us what we can expect. Kate says, and to be honest, what is the alternative that is any better? Okay, so let me get that old banner off of here. There we go. That's just me. Oh dear. I'm curious to discover, like, who do we think is going to be at first that sweet blackberry, and who is going to be the more dangerous nightshade? And will we then see a little bit of both in the different characters, in Nell and Sula, as we make our way through the book? Will we see that maybe on the surface one seems this way, nice and sweet, but deep down inside there's a little bit of poison? Or will we see that one seems abrasive, but there's a very tender heart? And will they then change places? And will it be hard for us to distinguish who is who, represented by what? Kate says, I don't want to be political, but many countries with a president are no better. That's very true. Many countries with a prime minister are no better either. I think everyone, we all have our issues, right? I think the trick is for us to be able to acknowledge that there are differences and try to overcome them instead of let them divide us. Danielle says, they may have to ride in the Jim Crow car, but they didn't have to smile about it. The smile was a turning point, a concession. That smile stood out to me most of all. Boone says, I was really bothered that in the last part of the book, said Nell would never leave Medallion. She went to bed dreaming of places to see. I hear what you're saying here, Boone, and I'm wondering, we can take that statement literally, right? That she never physically leaves Medallion. But at the same time, I wonder if we can take it also in the sense that she never leaves Medallion, in that the experiences there and the person that she becomes and is while she is in Medallion always comes with her wherever she goes, such that she doesn't really leave it. Do you know what I mean? Maybe she will leave it physically one day, but Medallion will always be in her and will always be the feeling she takes with her. I don't know. What do you think of that? Kate says, I think everyone is a mixture of good and bad. And Tennille says, yes, that trip expanded her world and her mind, but she didn't act on those thoughts except to become friends with Sula. Kate said, you don't know what you're capable of until it happens, i.e. in war when you are forced to commit what are evil acts. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Okay, Rune says that what I suggested made some sense. Good. I'm glad. I'm making a bit of sense right now. I'm so hot in here. Oh my goodness. Debs Wing says, I thought she wanted to travel until she became friends with Sula. Oh, interesting. Do you mean like, I guess, right? I mean, I'm trying to think what you're suggesting here. And yes, Sula would have opened up a very different world, right? To now, right there in her own hometown. She wouldn't have to leave anywhere to start discovering new facets of life, right? New people, new thoughts, new ways of doing things. Deb says she said she dreamed of faraway places, but then she met Sula. Tennille says, don't say what you will or will not do. That's an old saying, and it means you never know how you will act until you are in that situation for yourself, so don't judge others. That's very right. This reminds me of something that I worked very hard on when my boys were little. I've always had, I think my greatest fear of any kind of a tragedy or challenge to overcome is that of fire, much more so than, God forbid, drowning. And so, of course, when our boys were very little, my husband and I had a plan how we get out of the house, where the exits are, etc., who does what, where do we meet. And then when the boys were a little bit older, we, of course, taught them how to get out, and we tried to reinforce with them that you leave without mommy and daddy if you have to. You leave without your brother. Mommy and daddy are going to do their best, and we're going to take care of the rest, and we're going to meet. And because I had such a fear of fire, I spent a lot of time trying to imagine myself, okay, if there's a wall of fire in front of me and I have to get through it, what is my mindset going to be? How am I just going to make myself do that? Now, of course, I'm fortunate that it was never tested, but I think you're very right to point out that we all have a vision of how we're going to behave in perhaps certain circumstances, but we don't really know until we're actually faced with that test, right? Danielle says, I agree, Voon. Some people move countries but live in the exact same way. And Danielle says, Sula was as far as she needed to go. Oh, I really like that. That's very nicely said, Danielle. Voon says, oh, this is so much fun. I'm really glad. That's great. I think it's wonderful, too. I'm so glad to meet all of you through this book club as well, too. And I hope as time goes on and we have these live streams, somebody's going to come up here on screen with me so I don't feel quite so lonely up here, and that everybody else has other smiling faces to look at. And I am, over time, going to work on getting us, I'm going to try to come up with like a background over here. I thought very much I would like to try to one day explore getting like a green screen and then putting up some sort of a background that's related to the theme of whatever we're reading. But all in time. Okay. So the floor is yours, guys. Please. What do we all think? What do we wish to do next? I actually thought when I was going through all of Tennille's questions, God bless you, Tennille. I'm not saying there were too many. I clearly fell behind today in typing them all up. I will be better prepared next time, God willing. But I actually thought this was going to take us more than an hour to get through. Kate says, I will at some point, but I have a I'm not going to get this right, eh? Glaswegian strong accent? Glaswegian. Probably saying that wrong, right? It was interesting. Very recently, my eldest son started creating a family tree on Ancestry. I have this really cool book that my maternal grandfather made during World War II, showing the history of our family going back, I think, to early 1700s, something like that. So my son started building that on Ancestry and started finding connections, and then adding my dad's side of the family, where there was little known because, of course, having been put in a labor camp from the Nazis, they left home with nothing. But very recently, he found out and connected with my father's eldest brother's first daughter. So my cousin, who is much, much older than me, because it took my parents a very long time to have me, and they live in Renfrewshire, Scotland. And it was so interesting hearing her voice over Skype when we were talking. I really enjoyed it. And I thought, I think, she has an accent, and Kate is saying she has an accent, but actually, to you, Kate, right? I'm the one with the accent, right? Oh, Glasgow. Okay, I think Renfrewshire, is near Glasgow, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe. Tennille says, Nell needed something. The trip unsettled her and left a hole. Fantasy about travel didn't suffice, but her friendship with Sula filled that hole and relieved the desire to seek something via travel. Very good. Okay, Kate says her accent is like Billy Connolly if you know him. No, I don't, but I'm certainly going to look him up now, Kate, so I get an idea. Vivian says, I really like your view on things, Neil. Yes, I do too. Kate says, Renfrewshire is beautiful. I'm sure the country you live in there is very, very beautiful, Kate. And Tennille is saying, thank you, Devon. I think you are wonderful. That's so sweet. What a lovely group we have here. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. If anyone, please, has suggestions for how I can approach the live stream differently, if there can be an improvement, or do you have suggestions to do things a bit differently, please just reach out and let me know. You can either do so right now on the About page of the channel, the Losers Club channel. If you go to the About page, my email address is there, but I've also put Tennille's email address there since she has been sending us the links to her videos via email. Excuse me. I know most of you have her email potentially anyway, and that she likely doesn't mind it being shared out with the group. So if I'm wrong with that, Tennille, please let me know. And also you will find a number of the individuals who are in our book club, some who aren't here with us necessarily tonight, have their own channels here on YouTube. And if you would like to get to know them a little bit, you will see that the Losers Club channel has a tab for channels where I have put links down to the different channels of the members of our group if you want to go and meet them, learn more about what they're about, and get to know them a little bit better. Okay, let me see. Deb's Way says, I think this was great. Little Aussie comments that you guys have made me see things from a different view. I'm going to reread it with your views added. Voon says, thank you, Voon, and thank you for helping with the test earlier. That was great. I was so glad you popped in. Kate says, Tennille is amazing with her literature and just with everything else. She is. She really is. And Tennille, you are a very sweet, dear soul. I love you very much, and I feel very privileged to count you among my friends. And I feel really honored that I get to be in this group with such wonderful people, and that we are enjoying this wonderful book club, and that we're going to get to know each other and explore ideas and thoughts and learn different points of view from each other also. And it's thanks to you for setting this up for us. So thank you so much, dear. Okay, Deb says, okay, what is the TARDIS? I'm assuming this has got to be a question directed towards Kate. So Kate, if you're here still, I think you are. Yep, you're on the floor. Okay, tell us what that's it. What it is. Can you bring some food next time? Guys, I am on a pre-op diet for my gastric bypass this Wednesday. So this is my diet. Water and otherwise a little diabetic protein shake. That's it. And I can't have anything else yummy around me right now. It's like a bit too tempting. Went shopping this evening, this afternoon with my husband to pick up supplies that I'm going to need to bring with me to the hospital because I keep kosher, and to have on hand at home. And just walking through the fruit section was a temptation. There were cherries and blueberries and bananas and peaches and mangoes and watermelon. Oh my gosh. Okay, Tennille. Oh, the TARDIS is the blue box Doctor Who travels in a sci-fi show. Really? Ah. Kate says Doctor Who's time machine, an old police phone box. Elsie says, who is Doctor Who? Yeah, I think, do those Doctor Who movies go back to like the early 60s, if I'm not mistaken? I can't remember. Deb's Way says, hey, Eden. Okay. Okay. Oh, here we go. Okay. I lost place there for a minute. Deb says, I never really got into Doctor Who. Little Elsie, yes, dear, I'm having my surgery this coming Wednesday morning. I have to be at the hospital at 6:30, and I think I'm first up, so probably by 7 a.m. So, yeah, exciting times. Kate says, time and relative distance in space is what it means. Ah, so TARDIS is an acronym for time and relative distance in space. Okay, got it. Good. Voon says, I haven't thought about Doctor Who in forever. Kate says, yes, that was from the 1960s. Tennille says, Doctor Who is a woman now. All right. Fair is fair, right, guys? Okay. Thank you, Voon. I see the prayer hands, and I'm assuming, please God, that'll be for me. So thank you. I would very much appreciate that. Okay. And thank you too, Little Elsie. I also appreciate that very much. That means an awful lot to me. Thank you, dear. And Eden, thank you. Thank you so very much. You are also very kind. And thank you, Kate. Thank you, Tennille. Thank you, everyone. So if I understand correctly then, for our next live stream, we are going to be moving to Monday nights at the same time. So that means 10 p.m. Eastern for many of us. For Tennille, it means 9 p.m. Blah, 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 blah. For Little Aussie and Eden, that's going to mean 12 noon. Just one day for, I think, so instead of Sunday nights, we're going to be doing it Monday nights. Or for you, Eden, and Little Aussie, it's going to be Tuesday around noon instead of Mondays. Right? So I think 3 a.m. for you, Kate. You are a trooper, Kate. Really. God bless you. And yes, thank you for pointing that. I was trying to remember the different time frames. I know. So people who didn't join us tonight, so let me tell you. Chris of A Foxy Mess and the channel Christina Fox, she popped in very early in the stream to say hi. But she is making a move right now from British Columbia back to Calgary, Alberta here in Canada. And so she's very, very busy with that. I did get a message from Dee from Dee's Delicious Bites and Dee's Cute and Crafty. She has 2 channels that she wasn't able to participate tonight because she had to be on duty tomorrow. She's also a registered nurse at, I think, 4 a.m. So she had to make sure she was in bed very, very early. I did not hear back from Dee Diets, but I do know that her little dog Buddy right now is going through a very difficult time physically. They're trying to get his back legs working again. He was fine until he was playing with one of the other resident dogs at home, and that dog jumped on his back, and so he's having a rough time. And so I think Dee is very stretched at home too with taking care of him, but I know she'll be with us at some point in the future as well too. Thank you to Neil for also your good wishes. Little Elsie says, no, it's 11 a.m. for Eden and Little Elsie, not noon. Oh, okay, I messed that up. I'm so sorry. I'll correct that in the future then. I think on the About page I had put the times for the different time zones, so I'm going to try to remember to change Australian Eastern Standard Time to 11 a.m. instead of the noon that I have there. Okie dokie. Deb, thank you so much also. I really appreciate it. God willing, all will go well. It means a lot to me that you're also caring. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all so much. And thank you all for joining us tonight. And I think Tennille is mentioning that in her last video for the Sula sections we just covered now, that she is going to be discussing which chapters we cover next. If I'm not mistaken, I think they're going to be 19, 21 to maybe 23. Let me not mess that up. Go listen to Tennille's video, or Tennille, please put it in the chat down here for us. And I suspect that then the next live stream will be next Monday. So same time, same place, same place here, guys. And just different chapters. And maybe others will be joining us. We'll see how it goes. But I guess we'll close it up now, unless somebody has something else to say. I want to thank everybody here for participating and joining us. I'm so looking forward to getting to know everybody better. And to Neil, I thank you for all you've done to create this wonderful book club for us, and all of the time and effort you put into giving such a thoughtful read to the books, and then sharing your insights and your very probing questions with us too, to get us thinking about it. Okay, so Kate says, take care, everyone. Stay safe. Lalasi says, thank you, everyone. To everybody, thank you. God bless you all. May you have a wonderful start to your week. A good night tonight. A good day, Eden and Ousty. Eden, I'm so glad you joined us. Also, I'm really looking forward to getting to know you too. Deb says, thank you, everyone. Tennille says, where are we? This has been fabulous. I adore discussing a good book with good people. Thank you, everyone, for making this possible. And June says, it has been such great fun with you all. And a little goodbye, Cousin Kate. That's so sweet. I want to be a cousin, too. Mind you, I'm kind of old for that, yeah? Maybe I could be an aunt. Grandma? I'll settle for any of them. I really will. Okay, guys. Good night. God bless. Please, if you have any questions, email us. Drop a comment down below. You'll find us, right? Okay. Good night, everyone. Bye, Eden. Bye-bye, all. Thank you so much. Stay blessed.